Hey everyone, welcome back to Reading with Tatiana. I am Canadian and I currently reside in Canada, and this month in June it's actually our National Indigenous Month. So the book I'm reviewing today is There by Tommy Orange, and I gave this book a 4 out of 5. My Booktuber shout today goes out to Ashley Bundy Books. I've actually tagged her in a few of my Booktube tag videos, but I've never given her a proper shout out. So I'll link her channel down below. She has a mix of TBRs, tags, and also wrap ups. And I really like her channel. So again, I'll link her channel down below. And as always, before I go into my full book review, if you're watching this video, please hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and comment down below if you have read this book There by Tommy Orange, or have any recommendations for Indigenous authors that I should definitely check out. This book, There by Tommy Orange, was published a few years ago in 2018, and the genre is general fiction, contemporary, and obviously Indigenous. A bit about the author Tommy Orange. So he graduated with an MFA or Master of Fine Arts at the Institute of American Indian Arts. I found this pretty cool because he is an enrolled member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma, which some of the characters in his book are also from. And he was born and raised in Oakland, where this book is also set. So I don't doubt that some of these stories that he shares and characters that he's built are taken from his life and from his family and his friends, which I think is pretty awesome. And not to mention that there's also his debut novel from back in 2018. Before I get into the premise of this book, I want to have a disclaimer that going forward in this review, I'll be using the word Indians just because in the book that was the vocabulary used. In Canada, I use the word Indigenous, which is the current for, I guess, vocabulary used now. However, in my lifetime so far, I'm in my mid-30s, we've used First Nations, Aboriginal, currently Indigenous. So I'm kind of curious if you're watching this video, depending where you're from, especially if you're from the US or Australia or any other countries, I'm curious what is the current day 2023 vocabulary used when referring to Indigenous people or First Nations or Indians. Now, to get into the premise of the book. So I really enjoyed this book because it kind of reminded me of of the author who wrote Ancient People, or I think his name is Frederick Bachman, just because there are 12 perspectives, and when the book starts, we're not sure how these people are connected or if they're even connected. But as the book progresses, they all become part of each other's lives, either by chance meeting in the book, or maybe there's some backstory they're not aware of, like someone is someone's uncle or someone is someone's dad. So I really like that part of the writing style. The book, as I mentioned earlier, same place where the author is from, is set in Oakland, California, and basically all these 12 characters are gunning or getting ready for the first inaugural Oakland powwow. So some of the characters are the organizers of the powwow, some are going to perform in the powwow, some are just attending powwow, and some are just I don't want to do any spoilers, but some of them have some intentions for the powwow. So this book is really great because for me, it introduced the idea of urban Indians and how it's really important because we, like, for me growing up, we think about Indians as this culture that we came and colonized, and we pillage and we like rape and like did all these horrible things to them. So we have this kind of like outdated image of what it means to be Indian. However, obviously since then, some of them have still live on reservations, but some have moved into the cities. So this book kind of challenges the archaic and the old viewpoint or stereotype they have of Indians, and how they're not a monolith, and there's so many different types of ways to be and to exist. And I really enjoyed that. I also really like the idea of, and because I have a friend who is, she's half Indian herself, but she presents as white. So this book talks about, through these 12 characters, some people who are only half Indian or half white, or maybe they're full Indian, but they're more like white presenting. And it's just very interesting to talk about their experiences through life and how they are socialized through society. And I think that's something that, as a Chinese person, I'm fully Chinese, I look Asian, but obviously, like, even being born here, when I meet my mom's friends, they can tell by the way I talk in Chinese that I'm clearly not like born in China or Hong Kong. So it's interesting to hear this other culture and these characters going through it as well. Also, one thing I like about this book, as you guys know, I love historical fiction. He talks about what I kind of like learned from school about how these stories of the Indians being colonized and how horrible that was. But in this book, the characters kind of make it into modern day times or have different analogies to make it be like, yo, that's like fucked up, even more so than it was. So I really enjoyed how Tommy Orange was able to push and insert these anecdotal stories of comparisons that like we can relate to more instead of being like, oh, like back in the day, like hundreds of years ago, like this happened. Like, yes, I know that's horrible, but then he is able to translate it to like a modern day comparable, and I really enjoyed it when I was reading that. Common themes I found out for this book. This is just touching the surface as there's so many things that you could talk about in this book. The number one is obviously when it comes to indigenous stories is generational trauma. Like, you know, in their culture, I think it's very common that you share stories and pass it down from generation to generation. And it's interesting because like, you know, from I can only speak from my personal experience with my social circle, but I feel in Chinese culture that a lot of our parents don't really talk about their childhood, their upbringing, and it's interesting because that generational trauma hasn't been passed to me. However, like sometimes I kind of wish I knew more about my parents and my grandparents and that kind of stuff. So this book talks about how it's very important that Indians pass on their stories, even when it's horrific, even if it's a massacre, down to your kids, down and down and down. And for me, it begs the question of like, is it a good thing? Like, yes, you should share this history, but also like passing this trauma on is also very heavy. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not an expert. This is just a thought I have, by the way, but I don't know, it makes me think about that. Um, and the other one is also identity. As I mentioned earlier, we meet these characters who are full Indian, half Indian, maybe adopted, and just like, you know, the idea of identity, what it means to belong, to not belong. Do you belong based on just how you look, or do you belong based on your upbringing, or do you belong because you've been accepted or not accepted by a community? This book talks about that quite a bit, and I think that's not just a common theme that's only prevalent in this community. It's prevalent in every community in the world. So I think that was a great thing that they touched on. And also, one quote that stuck with me is that the idea is we aren't inheriting the world from our ancestors, we're borrowing from future generations. And I love that quote because, you know, we kind of feel like we're giving things from our past, but really we should think about not that what we're entitled to and what we deserve, but more about how we can live our present life and live it better for the future. I really love the idea of this quote that was in this book. So I gave this book a 4 out of 5, so clearly there was some things I didn't like. I felt like this book, it was pretty short. I think it was only like, this physical copy I have is only 290 pages. So having 12 characters I felt was too many. And there were some side characters that I felt weren't really needed to propel the plot. But I guess they just want to show how there are many different types of ways to be urban Indian, so I get it. But I just wish there were more times with just the few main characters. And I also liked it, I would have liked it if there was a page in the beginning or in the back where there's kind of like a cast of characters to refer back to, just because there were so many characters, and you know, there are obviously names that I'm not familiar with. And you know, when I've read other books that are in other cultures, that usually is a common theme where they have like a cast of characters to refer to. Things I did enjoy about the book, I kind of touched on, I think, in the premise and the common themes, is I really love the honest experiences of each character and the struggles and also the resilience. I'm obviously assuming here, but I think because Tommy Orange is from similar tribes and the characters, and also from Oakland as well, I do believe he is drawing from parts of reality, and I really enjoyed reading about these stories. And also I really enjoyed that, you know, you obviously can't paint a whole group of people all the same. There's no group that is a monolith. So I think the author does a really great job showing the diversity within this community. I also like the parallels of bringing history back. As I mentioned earlier, we know that in history of hundreds of years ago, that these colonizers did all these horrible things to these Indians. However, I really like how Tommy Orange does these modern stories and these anecdotes to draw these parallels and to make it really a historical fiction. On Goodreads, this book got an average of 3.98 out of 5, which I think is a pretty good rating for a book that's been out several years. People didn't like it because they felt it started really strong, but it kind of fell flat in between for the plot, and you know, it doesn't really push through until the end. I kind of agree with that, just because there were so many characters that, you know, there's a lot of like building in the middle of the book that's just like, okay, where is this going? But in the end, it's worth it, or I think it's worth it. Good reviews where people thought it was gut wrenching. They felt it was really intimate about dislocation, identity, violence, loss, hope, and power. Again, it's a great book. I think, especially if you want to learn more about Indian culture, and I don't know, I think it's important to learn about it. And people also love how, similar to me, I said earlier that there are 12 characters, and you're not sure how they're all connected, but in the end, we kind of see them all like show up in each other's like stories, and I really enjoyed that. Why I think you should read this book is I think you should read it if you want to learn more about indigenous culture, specifically Oakland, California. I I'm Canadian, so I actually picked up this book because I thought it was a Canadian offer, but it isn't. But it's totally fine. So yeah, I think it's a great book to read. Now I'll share how this book made me feel because when people recommend me a book, I always like to ask them how it made them feel because a week, a day, a year, 5 years from now, I probably won't remember exactly what the book was about. I mean, even now, during this review, I can't name you all 12 characters in the book, but I also remember how this book made me feel. So this book, There by Tommy Orange, it made me feel sad. It made me feel sad about how sometimes people are the product of their environments, and yes, we're able to, do better, have opportunities to make our lives better, to break the cycle, but some people can't. It just makes me sad that that's a reality for some people. This book is like, some books talks about like my last review or few years ago, All My Rage by Saba Tahir. It talks about people born in this like shitty environment, and that's a young adult's book, so people are able to break through and have this like optimistic ending. But this book is kind of like more realistic, and it's not always like a happy ending. So yeah, this book was sad, but I think it's a great read. Thank you for watching the end of my book review for There by Tommy Orange. If you've read this book, I'd love to hear what you thought down below. And as always, please subscribe if you're watching until the end, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!